Philosophers don't usually talk about this, but I will. Before you were born, your soul didn't choose peace. It chose friction. It chose the exact conditions that would force you to become who you're meant to be. And that choice, it looked like a toxic family. Stay with me. This will make sense in ways that will change everything. You've probably been told that toxic families are just bad luck, that you need to heal and move on, or that you were somehow chosen to suffer as a cosmic punishment. That's a lie. Here's the truth no one is saying. Awakened souls are not randomly assigned to toxic families. They're strategically placed there, not by a cruel God, but by the architecture of moral and spiritual development itself. And I know that sounds strange coming from someone like me, someone who spent his entire life writing about pure reason and moral law. But the older I got, the more I realized that the universe operates on principles we can barely perceive. And one of those principles is this. The souls with the greatest capacity for light are often born into the deepest darkness, not as punishment, as preparation. This video will show you why your suffering was not meaningless, but meaningful in a way you haven't been taught to see. How toxic families function as contrast agents that reveal your true nature, like darkness reveals light. Why trying to heal from your family might be the wrong goal, and what the right goal actually is. And the difference between victimhood, which traps you, and purposeful struggle, which frees you. The myth I'm busting today is that you're supposed to feel grateful for toxic families, or that everything happens for a reason in some vague, spiritual way. No, the reframe is this. Your toxic family didn't happen to you. It happened for the world. Because the world needs people who have learned to see in the dark, who have developed moral clarity in moral chaos, who have become lighthouses because they were born in storms. And if you've ever felt like you were placed in the wrong family, like you don't belong, like you were born into people who could never understand you, then you're exactly who I'm talking to right now. So let's begin with the first reason. You cannot know light without darkness. Awakened souls are born into toxic families because contrast is the only teacher of discernment. If you'd been born into unconditional love, you might never have questioned, never searched, never woken up. Think about it. When everything around you is comfortable, when everyone loves you well, when there's no friction, no pain, no confusion, you have no reason to look deeper. You accept the surface of life as all there is. But when you're born into a family where love is conditional, where affection is withheld, where you're criticized, neglected, manipulated, or made to feel invisible, something inside you starts to ask questions. Why does this hurt? Why do I feel so alone? Why doesn't this feel like love, even though they call it love? And that questioning, that deep, aching need to understand, that is the beginning of consciousness. That is the birth of awakening. Let me give you an image. Imagine a child raised in a completely soundproof room. Everything is silent. They grow up never hearing a single sound. Then one day, someone opens the door, and for the first time in their life, they hear music. In that moment, they don't just hear the music. They suddenly understand what silence was. They recognize it. They feel it. They know it in a way they never could have before. That's what a toxic family does for an awakened soul. It gives you contrast. It shows you what love is not, so that when you finally encounter real love, real kindness, real respect, you recognize it instantly. You don't take it for granted. You don't confuse it with anything else. You know it deeply because you've lived in its absence. And here's the part most people miss. That contrast doesn't just teach you about love. It teaches you about yourself. It teaches you that you have standards, that you have worth, that you have an inner voice that says this is wrong even when everyone around you insists it's normal. Your toxic family didn't just hurt you. It revealed you. It showed you that you're not like them, that you see things they don't see, that you feel things they can't feel. And that revelation is sacred. It's the crack where the light gets in. But why does contrast have to hurt so much? That brings us to the second reason. Moral strength requires moral resistance. I spent my entire life writing about duty, about the moral law within us, about the categorical imperative. And one thing became very clear to me. You cannot develop moral character in a world where everyone is already moral. You cannot become strong if there's nothing to push against. Toxic families are the gymnasium of the soul. They force you to choose goodness when goodness is not modeled. And that choice, that decision to be kind when you've been shown cruelty, to be honest when you've been lied to be gentle when you've been treated harshly, that choice is sacred. It's the ultimate expression of moral autonomy. You're not good because someone taught you to be good. You are good because you chose it in the face of its opposite. Think about a blacksmith for a moment. Steel is not made strong in comfort. It's made strong through fire and pressure. The blacksmith heats the metal until it glows, then hammers it, then plunges it into cold water. Over and over, the metal resists. It wants to stay soft, but the process makes it unbreakable. Your toxic family was the fire. Your pain was the hammer. And every time you chose to stay true to yourself, to your values, to your inner sense of right and wrong, you were being forged. You were becoming unbreakable. And here's what no one tells you. The people who've had it easy, who grew up in healthy families, who were loved well and never had to fight for their dignity, they often don't develop this kind of strength. They're good people, yes, but they've never been tested. They've never had to choose their goodness in the dark. You have, and that makes you different. That makes you rare. You have a kind of moral strength that can only be built in the fire. And the world desperately needs that strength. It needs people who know how to stand firm when everything around them is chaos. It needs people who've learned to trust their own moral compass because they've had to navigate without anyone else's guidance. And yet, strength alone is not the goal. There's something deeper happening, something about seeing. You were born with different eyes. Awakened souls perceive moral and emotional truth that others don't. Toxic families are full of illusions. They tell you that control is love, that silence is peace, that obedience is respect. They gaslight you, manipulate you, make you question your own perceptions. And you, with your heightened sensitivity, with your ability to feel the truth beneath the surface, you were born to see through them. Your pain is not malfunction. It's hypersensitivity to falsehood. You're not broken. You're a lie detector. I want you to really hear this. When you were a child and you felt that something was wrong, even though everyone acted like everything was fine, you were right. When you sensed the anger beneath the smile, the resentment beneath the silence, the manipulation beneath the gift, you were right. Your nervous system was not overreacting. It was perceiving reality more accurately than the people around you. You were like the child in the crowd who alone notices the emperor has no clothes. Everyone else sees the beautiful robes because they've been told to see them. But you see the truth. And that makes you incredibly uncomfortable to be around for people who are invested in the illusion. This is why awakened souls often feel so alienated in their families. Not because they're difficult or dramatic or too sensitive, but because they see what others refuse to see. And that seeing, that ability to perceive truth, is exactly why you were placed there. You were meant to see through the lies. You were meant to recognize dysfunction as dysfunction, not normalize it. You were meant to be the one who says, this is not okay. Even if you only said it to yourself, even if you had no words for it as a child, even if all you knew was that something felt deeply wrong. But if we see the truth others don't, why does it feel so isolating? Why are we so alone? That's where the fourth reason breaks everything open. Isolation births original thought. Every great philosopher, every mystic, every innovator in human history was lonely. They had to be, because original thought cannot happen in an echo chamber. It cannot happen when you're constantly surrounded by people who tell you what to think, what to feel, what to believe. Toxic families create existential isolation. They make you feel like you're on an island, like no one understands you, like you're fundamentally different from everyone around you. And that isolation, as painful as it is, forces you to think for yourself. It forces you to build your own moral compass. It forces you to stop outsourcing your truth to people who don't have your answers. You are not abandoned. You are apprenticed to your own inner authority. Let me say that again. You are apprenticed to your own inner authority. When you couldn't rely on your parents to reflect your worth back to you, you had to find it within yourself. When you couldn't trust the people around you to tell you the truth, You had to develop your own sense of discernment. When you had no one to guide you, you had to become your own guide. And that process, that lonely, painful, beautiful process of learning to trust yourself, that is the most important education you will ever receive. Think about the hermit who goes into the cave alone. They have no one to talk to, no one to distract them, no one to tell them what's real. They sit with themselves in the darkness. And in that solitude, they discover fire. They discover light, not because someone handed it to them, but because they had to find it themselves. And then they return to the world, and they bring that fire with them. They share it. They teach others. But they could never have found it if they hadn't been alone first. That's you. Your isolation in your toxic family was not rejection. It was initiation. You were being initiated into self-reliance, into inner knowing, into the kind of wisdom that can only come from sitting alone with your own soul and learning to trust what it tells you. And now, you have something most people will never have. You have sovereignty. You have inner authority. You don't need external validation to know who you are. You don't need someone else's permission to trust your own perceptions. You've already been through the fire. You've already learned to rely on yourself. And that makes you free in a way most people will never understand. So we've become strong. We've become wise. We've become sovereign. But for what? What is all this for? That's the fifth reason, and it's the one that will make you cry. The world needs wounded healers. You were not born into a toxic family to escape it and live happily ever after. You were born there to learn a language, the language of pain, confusion, survival, and transformation, so you could translate it for others. Your wound is your credential. Your survival is your sermon. You didn't go through all of that just for yourself. You went through it for every person who is still lost in the dark, who still thinks they're crazy, who still believes the lies their family told them. You went through it so you could be the lighthouse. I know this is hard to hear, especially if you're still in pain, if you're still healing, if you're still angry. You have every right to be angry. You have every right to grieve. But I also want you to see the bigger picture. There are people right now, in this very moment, who are exactly where you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. They're sitting in that toxic family, feeling invisible, feeling worthless, feeling like something is wrong with them. And they need someone who's been there. They need someone who understands. They need someone who can say, I know what that feels like, and you're not crazy, and there's a way through this. That someone is you. You're the one who fell into the well and learned to climb. And now you get to throw down the rope for others. That is not your burden. That is your purpose. That is why you went through what you went through. Not because you deserved it, not because you were being punished, but because the universe knew you had the strength to survive it and the heart to help others survive it too. You're not a victim who got strong. You were a lighthouse that was placed in the storm. So let's land this plane. You were born into a toxic family not because you deserved it, but because the universe needed someone with your specific eyes, your specific moral sensitivity, your specific capacity for discernment. You were placed in contrast so you could recognize light. You were placed in moral chaos so you could build moral strength. You were placed in illusion so you could become a truth teller. You were placed in isolation so you could discover your own authority. And you were placed in woundedness so you could become a healer. This is not about forgiving them. This is not about going back. This is about recognizing that you are exactly who you were meant to become. And your family, in all their brokenness, was the kiln. They didn't mean to forge you. They probably have no idea what they created, but you were forged nonetheless. And now you stand here, stronger, wiser, clearer than you ever thought possible. So hear this. You are not broken. You were forged. You're not damaged. You are discerning. You are not alone. You are sovereign. You are not a mistake. You are a mission. And the family that could not see you, they were never meant to. You were meant to see yourself and then light the way for others who are still in the dark. If this landed for you, if you felt seen, if something shifted, leave me a comment below. Tell me which reason hit hardest, or share your own story if you feel called. I read them all. And if you want more philosophy that actually speaks to the soul, not just the mind, hit subscribe. This channel is for people who think deeply and feel deeply, and I'm honored you're here. Until next time, trust your inner light. It was made in the dark for a reason.